The different entries into medicine have come about because out of these 100,000 doctors in Australia, there are very few Aboriginal doctors. So while we make up 3% of the general population, we make up less than 1% of the medical population. So there's a real need for more Aboriginal doctors, and so the entry pathways are developed.
Some people have asked us why, we have special privileges like getting entry into medicine courses and things like that. And there's some really easy responses to that, because basically, you can look at any of the statistics Australia-wide about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's access to education, and we just have a lot less access to education across the board.
I think it came up in terms of that we might have been taking the place of someone else who had a righteous ownership of that place, and that we necessarily did not have that. But because our people haven't had the same opportunity in education, again, we have programs to help people enter. But once you're there, you've got to perform the same as everyone else, or you're out the door.
It's not just Aboriginal people who have an entry pathway. There are rural medical students out there that have a pathway as well. So there are different pathways out there, and I wouldn't say any of them are easier. And having gone through a process like that myself, it was not easier. There are different hurdles that you have to go through, different assessment criteria that you have to meet, and you're always then reflecting on that. You have been given this opportunity to attend medical school, and it's an amazing opportunity, and you don't want to let people down. So it's not an easy pathway.
I think the conversations from students about why do Indigenous students get access to alternative entry pathways, it presumes that access to university only happens when you put your application in. The pipeline in terms of accessing university is also about what home life is like. It's about education opportunities from birth, not just at the point of entry at a university. We know that Indigenous people have systematically been denied access to the education system in this country. We have to do something about that.
I got asked about entry into medicine and if it was easier or what I had to do. And you have to do, you still have to do the interview process, and you still have to do a few of the other tests. But I'd say, look, they need more Aboriginal doctors and Aboriginal communities, because how many of you guys here want to go and work in an Aboriginal community? And none of them would acknowledge that they wouldn't. So that's right, and that's why they need more Aboriginal doctors.
Again, you've got to really look at what is the motivation of someone. People that are asking that kind of question are out for the why did I have to work harder than you to get into medicine? And that person is always going to think that they are the most righteous, deserving candidate of an MBBS or an MD, and that you're not. And that's their point of view. Pick your battles, stay safe and pick your battles. That's my number one message. But with the people that are just like, oh, okay, so I'm quite proud to tell people that I got in through the alternative pathway, the Indigenous entry route, and I tell them, look, it's an affirmative action program. It's a pathway to get people into medical school, but for people that otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to get in.
Essentially, places are set up for Indigenous students because Indigenous people suffer from 2 to 3 times more health burden or disease burden than non-Indigenous people. And the evidence really shows that Indigenous doctors, although we can't do it alone, really make a bigger difference to chipping away at those health inequities than our non-Indigenous doctor counterparts.
Mostly the pathways are actually more intensive than the normal university entry pathway. They often have a lot more elements. So the reason why the pathways are there is to increase our doctor numbers, which there's a definite need to do. But increasingly those entry programs are looking at getting the absolute best candidates that they can. So they're in fact harder in a lot of cases than the standard entry pathway.
And I know here at Newcastle, one of the things that I'd seen over time is that in so many ways I felt like we were setting people up for failure because we were accepting people in who in their life it wasn't the right time for them, or they might have needed to do a bit more science study, those kinds of things. So that's why we changed the program to the Mirrabah program of entry, and it's an Indigenous entry program into medicine. But if you think if someone were to say, oh, it's an easier entry, then they're really fooling themselves, because in fact it's probably much harder than just the straightforward sitting the multiple station assessment and the PQA and those kinds of things, because our students would do all of that stuff, plus they do all this extra stuff.
It doesn't mean that Indigenous medical students do not have to be clinically competent. It does not mean that Indigenous students don't have to be assessed in the same way that every other student is. And oftentimes Indigenous students have to be 10 times better.
So these spots are set up essentially not for us, but to remove inequity. It's also really important, I think, to note that the spots come from a funding source that is set up in a way that we're not taking spots from our or any non-Indigenous students. These spots have been set up as extra spots that take away some of the barriers for us.
In the end, when you graduate, you've had to sit the same exams as everyone else. You've had to attend the same lectures as everyone else. So there's no easy about it.
And the fact of the matter is that they just need more Aboriginal doctors out there, and they are willing to do anything to get that opportunity rather than through, because we still have to do the same exams, we still get marked the same on everything. It's just how you get in. Any ways or processes for helping us to get into the institutions is really important, and it's being proactive about that's really important as well, because lots of us wouldn't make it into medicine if we had to go through a whole lot of different processes around being in the top 2% of the state or whatever it is for education. Having said that though, we've had 3 students now that have come in through our process who've duxed medical schools, which means they've done better than everybody else who was in the top 2% anyway. So basically, we'll often say, actually, we have really smart people, they just need to be supported, and they'll do better than other people in Australia. So I think that kind of picks up on some of that special privilege stuff. It means though that we have disadvantage. That's why we get special privileges.
I have graduated with the same requirement. The entry criteria might have been different for me, but I had to prove academic capability. I had to prove a commitment to my goals to be a doctor. I had to prove that I could communicate the way a doctor should be able to communicate, and I have graduated with the same criteria that were expected of my non-Indigenous peers.